Hello, my name is Ashley Hopkins. Today is November 16, 2012. I am a team member of Project Team Number 5. Our topic is over the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. I will be presenting the first 10 slides of our PowerPoint presentation. The problem and purpose of the presentation is to recommend the measures that Company X, which recently went public, should take to comply with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. There are 4 topics that we will be discussing. The first topic will discuss the government regulations that led up to and helped shape the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The second topic is over the history of the crimes that the Act applies to. These are also known as white-collar crimes. I will be discussing these first 2 topics, and my teammate Scott Gregory will be discussing topic 3, history of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and topic 4, Sarbanes-Oxley Act of today. What is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act? In the simplest of terms, it is government legislation that was written and enacted to hold publicly traded businesses accountable for its financial documents and business practices. All financial documents are required to be accurate and up to date. The CEO or the CFO is required to sign the documents, ensuring its accuracy. In effect, if it's the CEO and the CFO responsible for any publicly released documents. The Act was written to restore the faith in the business world. After the collapse of Enron and WorldCom, 2 major companies in the United States, which I will be discussing later, the public view on companies and business practices diminished drastically. The United States government was well aware that something had to be done to hold businesses responsible and protect the economy and investors. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was the government's response and cure to having investors want to put their money back into the stock market and publicly traded companies. Government regulations prior to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The first regulations that were enacted to regulate publicly traded businesses were enacted in 1933 and 1934. The Securities Act of 1933 was revised in 1934 and came to be known as the Securities Act of 1934. These 2 acts came to be known as the Truth and Securities Laws. All the rules and regulations based on the Sarbanes-Oxley Act can be traced to these 2 acts. The Security Act of 1933 and 1934 can be considered the foundation to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The acts created regulations that required all publicly traded companies to release all financial information to its investors. It was required to be accurate and up to date. The 1934 Securities Act created the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. The commission was created to protect investors, maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitate capital formation. The Securities and Exchange Commission is also known as the SEC and is still in place today. The SEC has been responsible for breaking down many scandals and corporate corruption, holding those accountable that engage in corporate scandals. The Trust Indenture Act of 1939's purpose was to protect the issuer and the bondholder. The terms of a bond can differ between companies or each transaction within a company. In general, a bond is a way for a company to raise capital. The company issues a bond and in return it receives a loan. The bond usually has the information of maturity dates, interest rates, and payments for the bond to be repaid to the bondholders. The law requires that a written agreement must be present if the bond is over $5 million and a trustee must be appointed for all bonds. A trustee is someone who looks out for the best interest of all parties. The trustee creates an unbiased and fair contract. It is also the responsibility of the trustee to sell any secured assets in the event that the issuer defaults on the bond. Investment Company and Advisors Act of 1940. This piece of legislation was enacted to regulate investment companies that offer investments to the public. It is meant to regulate investment activities by requiring any investment company to register with the SEC. Registration makes it easier for the SEC to regulate investment activities and ensure that investments are fair and investors are not price gouging. History of white-collar crime. White-collar crime is considered a nonviolent crime. There is no physical victim, but harm is done in an emotional or a financial way. The effects of white-collar crime can include bankruptcy, business collapsing, market crashes, stock plummeting, and loss of potentially many jobs. This only names a few of the effects from corporate scandals in white-collar crime, but it's nowhere close to all of them. There is also a long list of crimes that fall under the white-collar crime title. These can include fraud, conspiracy, falsification of documents, bribery, and embezzlement. Once again, this is only to name a few, and as new corporate corruption and scandals arise, new types of crimes are being added to the white-collar crime list. This is a graph of the most common white-collar crimes. As you can see, these are not heinous crimes like murder. There's no, physical victim, but these all end up having severe consequences for innocent parties, whether it be a loss of jobs, a company collapsing, or the stock market being shaky. There's so many things that go wrong. They're expensive crimes. On this slide, I'm going to be discussing both Enron and WorldCom. I'll be first discussing Enron. Both of these are two of the most recognized organizations that collapsed due to the illegal actions of employees and executives. Enron was a leading energy company. For many years, it reported large revenues, such as in 2000, when revenues were reported to be $979 million, which were overstated by $132 million. This overstatement was only one of many years that these overstatements were given. And this built up to the collapse of Enron. Enron was not a small company. As shown here, Enron had roughly 21,000 employees in over 30 countries, and the employees held millions of dollars in 401k plans and stocks. Those were the biggest innocent parties, were the people that didn't engage in this corporate scandal and had so much money invested in these companies and lost everything. There were many activities that attributed to Enron's downfall, but the most notable are accounting frauds, which included off-the-record transactions and earning overstatements, destruction of documents and audits, which included the offshore account information, and greedy executives. The SEC and the United States government started looking into Enron's business practices and financial records when Enron showed extremely record-high profits and then a suspicious CEO change. It is rare a CEO change will occur after record-high profits. After everything came to the surface and all of Enron's illegal and unethical business practices were known, approximately 22 people were facing criminal charges. One CEO was sentenced to 24 years and 4 months in prison for his involvement in the illegal activities. The other CEO was looking at facing up to 45 years, but he passed away before he was able to stand trial. 20 other employees and business associates were found guilty of crimes ranging from falsifying and manipulating documents, accounting fraud, money laundering, wire fraud, and filing false tax returns. Now on to WorldCom. WorldCom was the United States' second top leading telecom company. When WorldCom collapsed, the U.S. government quickly enacted the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Enron had made the government start looking into writing legislation to control publicly traded companies. But after WorldCom and Adelphia fell, it was enacted quickly. WorldCom, when they filed bankruptcy, had $107 billion in assets and $41 billion in debt. WorldCom had almost 3 times as many employees and operated in more than double the countries that Enron did. As seen, WorldCom had 60,000 employees in 65 different countries. The scandals at WorldCom were quite similar to those at Enron, including manipulating accounting reports, falsifying documents for shareholders, and executives securing loans through WorldCom for personal use. Many of the executives, accountants, and business associates pled guilty and received various sentences ranging from prison terms, probations, and fines. This graph is used to show the differences between Enron and WorldCom's assets to debt amounts at the time the company filed bankruptcy. At the time of bankruptcy filing, Enron had $62 million in assets and $13 million in debts. Enron was the largest bankruptcy filing to date until WorldCom came in and filed bankruptcy later. When WorldCom filed bankruptcy, it had $107 million in assets and $41 million in debt. The corporate scandals and bankruptcy filing of both these companies hit the United States hard. The reputation of businesses were drastically diminished, and many people had lost faith in all of the business world. Luckily, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act helped rebuild the confidence in business. Now Scott Gregory will take over the discussion on topic 3 and topic 4. Thank you for your time today.